This is the kind of upward trend that we all want to see, that everybody wants to see when you start out rocky like that.
Ask the Dean, episode 35.
35.
Dr. Scott Wright, how are you doing?
Doing well. I can't believe it's episode 35 of these things. We rocking and rolling.
Having fun every week.
Yep.
Flies when you're in a pandemic.
Yep.
Rachel Grubbs, co-founder of Mapped. How are you today, my friend?
I'm well. I'm happy that our MCAT April, May, June testers finally know how they can sign up for the MCAT.
Yeah.
Yes. Talk about that.
Yeah. So the WMC just posted on Twitter, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half ago. And they're going to do it a little different this time. As some of you may know or painfully remember, the demand for MCAT test dates is real high, and it's had some rough impact on the WMC bandwidth. So this time they are splitting the country, I think roughly in half by population. So not in half, when you're looking at a map. And it looks like, please check the official WMC website, but it looks like more or less if you live in the Eastern time zone, or I should say, if you intend to test in the Eastern time zone, then you can begin registering for the MCAT Wednesday, February 17th. And then if you're going to test anywhere west of that in the US, then registration begins on Thursday, the 18th, both at noon Eastern.
Someone puts their thinking cap on.
Yeah, I think that's an improvement.
Yeah.
I hope that it means there will be no crashing. Obviously, I'm not part of the WAMC, and I'm not making you guys any promises, but I think we can all will it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a phenomenal adjustment, and it may not work, but it's something different.
It's an effort.
It's an effort. It's so good. Yeah. Good on them. Awesome.
Yeah, I was really pleased.
Okay.
I like that they're announcing noon in advance. They've done that a couple times now. It's much more reasonable to just know the time rather than waiting.
Yep.
Noon Eastern is not too bad because it means even if you're in Hawaii, the earliest is the 6 a.m. wake up to do it. Sorry, international folks. I'm just talking about the 50 U.S. states right now.
Yeah.
But so, we've had times where people got up at 3 a.m. and then it still didn't open for hours. So this is getting into a better train where, you may only have a couple weeks notice, but now you have a plan. Yeah. Oh, and someone from Facebook just chimed in that they also got emails better than just tweets. So that's a big improvement.
Yeah.
I myself am on Twitter more than I should be, but I know Twitter is not the social medium of choice for most pre-med. So I'm glad you guys got an announcement other than through Twitter.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Let's kind of talk about who we are, because a lot of people potentially are seeing us for the first time. We're kind of live streaming this to Clubhouse as well, which is a new app that I'm addicted to because I love conversations. We are the Mapped team. Mapped is a technology platform that I've co-founded with Rachel Grubbs. And we do these Ask the Dean recordings typically in our private Facebook group for students who have signed up for Mapped. And Mapped is a tool for pre-meds. Every pre-med, as soon as you know you're pre-med starting freshman year, we recommend that you go sign up for a Mapped account, enter all of your courses, enter all of the activities you're doing, and use that as a place to track, but as well as get feedback on your journey. As we are building Mapped, and it's still only several months old at this point, we are continuing to add new features to it. We're continuing to add feedback so that we know, based on the data that you're giving us, we can give you really pointed, based on kind of some algorithms that we're creating, some pointed feedback specifically for you. So it's not me going in there giving you feedback, but it's the algorithms that my brain, Rachel's brain, Scott's brain have created to give this advice to everyone. And so we have decided, I think firmly, that the first Monday of every month, we're going to take what is normally a private Facebook live stream, and we're going to kind of stream it to the world just to get some more voices heard and to answer some more questions. So that's who we are. I'm ready to start answering some questions. Anything else, Rachel or Scott?
No, that's great. Let's hop in. We did have a couple pre-asked if you want to get to those, and then I'll start fielding them from our live groups.
Yeah.
Just for the audience, we've got some of you on our private Facebook group, most of you on map.pv on YouTube. And then I think we've also got some folks calling in through Clubhouse.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so first one here, I have 280 clinical hours, and because of COVID, I have not gotten clinical hours for a whole year. I can probably get about 100, 200 in the next months. Would medical schools frown on this? Right, and COVID is the topic of the day every week in Ask the Dean. It's awesome, right, Scott? A lot of these students that are asking this question don't have any clinical hours. They were going to cram it all in at the end, and then COVID screwed them. This student, 280 already, still potentially planning on fitting more in. So I like it. Sounds good to me. Oh, you're muted, Scott. I don't hear you.
Sorry.
That's all right.
So the question being, what would medical schools frown on this?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think they would be receptive and will understand completely about the lack of clinical hours for a year, and so I wouldn't worry about it.
It's funny, right? I remember being a pre-med student and being scared of this whole process, but it's just I wonder that fear, that imposter syndrome, the insecurities that students have now. It's like, I don't have anything, and like neither does anyone else. Like,
yeah, right.
What do you think's been going on this whole past year?
Yeah,
no, it's funny, but I get it.
It is funny.
All right, next question here. I graduated undergrad in 2013 as a biology major. I obtained my master's in biotechnology in 2017. What date would schools look at to determine how old my prerequisite coursework was completed?
So prereqs can't be, generally speaking, prereqs cannot be master or graduate level coursework. And so they're going to look at the undergrad courses that you took prior to 2013 is where all those prereqs are going to be coming from. So, depending on, if I can presume that, a lot of the general chemistry, organic, physics, lower level biology classes were in 2000, probably 10, 11, then that's a decade old.
Yeah.
So now what that leads you to do, I don't know. I think that, I'd go ahead and apply with that, and see what happens. But I'll always look at the schools that you're most interested in, and see if they indicate anything about prereqs needing to be a certain, within a certain time period before you apply.
Yeah. It's funny. I just recorded an old Premeds podcast episode right before this, and that was the question. It was 33-year-old, did extremely well, as it sounded like a pre-med major in undergrad, but ended up not getting into medical school and then taking a lot of time off. And there's this big myth that we talk about all the time that prereqs expire, and it's just not true for most medical schools. So
right.
I told the story of a Texas resident, actually, Texas applicant. She was a physical therapist and hadn't taken any classes since graduating physical therapy school 20 years ago. Took the MCAT, crushed it, applied to medical school, got in. So
yeah,
it's definitely possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, for those of you on Clubhouse, we're recording Ask the Dean here live. We'll bring in some students on Clubhouse. I'm with Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern Medical School, and Rachel Grubbs, my co-founder of Mapped, answering questions here that we've gotten on Facebook and YouTube right now. This next question, I worked hands-on with children who have neurological and motor disorders such as cerebral palsy to help them perform daily tasks such as eating, walking, brushing teeth, etc. The program is called conductive education. Is this considered clinical experience?
I would think so.
Yeah. Right. It's the biggest question that students have is it sounds like this isn't necessarily in a quote unquote clinical environment
setting.
Therefore, it must not be clinical. But this is clinical to me.
Oh yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah, awesome. That sounds like a great job. I would love to know, right? Conductive education. That's a great name. I've never heard that term before. So if you're a pre-med student looking for clinical experience, there's a good search term to go conductive education. Insert your hometown there and see if there's any opportunities for something similar.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And next question here. I've been working on lung trauma and infection treatment research with rabbits. I don't know why rabbits is capitalized for the last 2.5 years. By shadowing in 9 specialists, I had very meaningful plus or minus interactions with physicians and patients. Unfortunately, I lack quote unquote clinical experience hours. What are your thoughts on the relevance of my experience and its impact on the medical admissions process?
So let's see here. I've been working on lung trauma and infection treatment research for rabbits, shadowing 9 specialists. Yeah, I mean, I think that would not be considered clinical. It's obviously research, but not clinical.
Yeah.
And so the lack of clinical experience is going to be real for you. I definitely think that you've got a lot of shadowing, so that's a positive thing. But I would like to see patient interaction with you. So I would say, yeah, it's going to add into the research that you've done is going to add into your application and be obviously clearly relevant. But I don't think that it's going to count toward clinical hours. And so I definitely would encourage you to get some clinical experience.
Scott, for yourself, former director of admissions at a medical school, why is clinical experience so important for a pre-med student who doesn't really understand this process? They just know they've always wanted to be a doctor. Why do I need to go get clinical experience? Why, from a medical school standpoint, are you looking at that?
Yeah, we're really looking at, I think admissions committees are really looking at trying to determine a number of different things. One is it requires you to get out there and really make an effort to find clinical experiences, to involve yourself in them, et cetera. So it's number one, it's the effort. That shows effort, and that's meaningful to an admissions committee that you've made, this effort to do that. Secondly, I think in terms of the strictly clinical aspect of it, they want to see that you know what you're getting into. Now, you do get some of that with shadowing, where you have an opportunity to watch physicians to see what they do, but it doesn't put you into contact directly with patients, because I think it's different standing in a room and saying, "Oh, I can." Watch this physician doing this. It's a whole nother thing to be yourself dealing with patients in whatever avenue that exists for you. And so I think admissions committees want to see that that medicine is not all glitz and glamour, that it's, that there's a lot of monotony to it. There's a lot of bureaucracy to it. And as in any healthcare career, and that you get a really good sense of this is what I've done, and this is what I want to continue to do in my career.
Yeah, it's not all hooking up in the janitor closet like Grey's Anatomy.
No.
Awesome. All right. Another question here. I have 3 years of bad grades, 55 units, 2.67 last 2 years. All right, so 3 years of bad grades, 55 credits, 267. Last 2 years, 53 credits, 3.6, or units, they say, 3.6 GPA. Should I continue this upward trend with a postbac or apply to medical school? Their upward trend is 323, 326, 375, and a 4.0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a great trend. This is the kind of thing that, if you start off kind of rocky, which a lot of students do in college, and especially for that freshman year, and I think that this is the kind of upward trend that we all want to see, that everybody wants to see when you start out rocky like that and move forward. To the question, I would say, a little bit of it depends on. It's a little bit difficult to get a sense of what the overall GPA might look like, but it looks like it would probably be similar number of units in the first 3 years to the first.
Split that in half.
Yeah, so
3.1-ish maybe.
Yeah, probably 3.1, 3.2, something like that. So that's still a little bit low for an overall GPA, but the trend is good. I mean, I would say optimally, you would continue that in a post-bac program, and show that this is real stuff and that you are committed to doing whatever you got to do to get into medical school. I wouldn't be opposed. It would certainly be acceptable to apply with this profile, but always within the context of understanding that you may not get in and that you may want to, you may have to reapply, so that in that gap year, in that application year, you have to sort of work toward what's my reapplication going to look like. Yeah. And so, I think a post-bac program sounds very reasonable to me in that scenario.
Yeah. Yep. And just to remember, it's one piece of the puzzle, right? Stats are one thing, but making sure that the rest of the application fits all of that as well. Clinical experience, shadowing, research, if you want to do that as well. Awesome. And for those of you on Clubhouse, we're streaming our Ask the Dean episode here on Clubhouse as well. We'll try to get some people on the stage to ask some questions here in a minute. We're going through on Facebook and YouTube, where we're streaming at mapped.tv, answering questions right now there. So raise your hand if you're in the audience on Clubhouse, and we'll bring you on ASAP. Next question.
Cool.
I did a postbac in clinical laboratory sciences. Seems to be a very common postbac, master's level postbac seems like. Not quite a quote-unquote medical school specific postbac, but still lots of hard sciences, 74 hours worth with a 3.5. Would this be good enough after a poor original GPA of a 2.9?
So several things. Good enough is a concerning phrase to me. Would this be good enough? There's no guarantees. There's no right way, wrong way necessarily to go about this. And so there's a lot of different pieces to this puzzle. So good enough. Nobody.
It's impossible to answer.
Yeah, the only way you can determine if it's good enough is if you apply and get in, then you know it was good enough.
And you applied to every single medical school out there.
Exactly. So I don't like the good enough idea, that mentality to say that you're good enough in that scenario. So, and to the point, let me also address something with regard to med lab sciences or clinical laboratory sciences. This is what we consider to be an allied health sort of area. This is not strictly a purely scientific, for the purposes of science, coursework. In other words, it's not like going into a biology program where you're getting a master's degree in biology.
Yep.
So what clinical laboratory science is doing is teaching content, but it's also teaching skills of, within the context of hematology. They're testing, they're taking courses and stuff on how you do blood tests and how you do, mechanically how you do all this stuff.
Yep.
And so there will be medical schools that will look at a master's program like that, although she doesn't say master's program, or he doesn't say master's program, but it's unclear, but I would say 3.5 is good. You could obviously go for it and see how things play out for you. But it is possible that some med schools may look at that and say, well, we don't really know what a 3.5 is in clinical laboratory sciences. We don't know what that means, as opposed to knowing what it meant in undergrad to take all these undergrad classes and generate a 3.0 or a 3.5 or a 4.0. So it's a little bit difficult. So the
talk
question
about that for a second, Scott. How much luck is involved? And I hate using that word, but how much luck is involved for an admissions committee member to have experience from another student who applied 3 years ago from the same program with the same degree, with the same GPA in that master's program, who did well in medical school, and that puts their mind at ease that you're going to do well as well, hopefully.
Right. Yeah, I think you have to recognize, and this is part of the admissions process, is that it's very personal. Yeah. It's very personal when it gets down to the medical schools looking deeply into applicants' lives and into who they are as a person. But it's also very personal when it comes to medical school admissions committees and their own experiences. So a committee member that has years of experience on that committee and has dealt with a lot of applicants and remembers applicants from certain programs or certain schools, then you're absolutely right. They're going to be much more amenable to, to accepting students from those programs or whatever. Now, I'll give you an example. We had an admissions committee member at UT Southwestern who, in her past life, had been a nurse. So she'd been a nurse for a number of years before she went to medical school, and so she was always this big advocate for nurses and other healthcare professionals coming into the medical school admissions process and really advocating for what they had done in their previous career. So I absolutely agree with you, Ryan, that the personal qualities, or the luck, as you called it, of who you get, who's on an admissions committee, what their own experiences are, both in the committee as well as previously in their life. All of that plays into this whole process of how things are going to work in the admissions committee relative to an application.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So again, for Clubhouse, where we're streaming Ask the Dean here live today, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'm with Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, as well as Rachel Grubbs, my co-founder at MAPT. Who has years and years of experience in the MCAT test prep world and some pre-med advising as well. So, next question up. We have, would it be wise to ask for letters of recommendations now, as we're recording this kind of February 1st, 2020, if I'm applying next year? So for next year, applying...
I'm happy to say it's 2021.
Yeah, did I say 2020? Sorry, 2021. So for next year, I was trying to do the for next year math in my head as well at the same time. So I'm assuming they're saying applying in 2022 to start 2023. Yeah. So to apply for 2023. All right. Yeah. If I'm considering applying this cycle but haven't decided what's an appropriate date to decide by. Okay, so they're on the...
Two questions.
Yeah. So I think, obviously... if you're potentially applying this cycle, go ahead and ask now.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer in setting expectations and potentially tell your letter writer, I'm not completely sure maybe that I'm applying this cycle, but there's a good chance, and I just want to make sure I'm ready, and I'd love a letter of recommendation. And please don't kill me if I come back and ask for it to be updated next year.
Yeah, agree completely. Yeah.
Awesome. Easy one. Let's rock and roll. Again, if you're on Clubhouse, you want to come ask a question, got some pre-med experts here, you can come join us. We're recording for Ask the Dean, which is a podcast that the MAPT team does. It's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. It's a YouTube series as well, video series as well at mapt.tv. So let's keep rocking and rolling here. Can being a caregiver to an ill family member be considered clinical experience? And if so, who will you put as an activity contact? I love this one because the AAMC has come out and said specifically, being a caregiver is considered clinical experience. Now, put an asterisk on that, Scott, because we have to always asterisk this one because a lot of students will only have being a caregiver for an ill family member as clinical experience.
Yep. Yeah, so I agree with you completely. Agree with the AAMC. This is clinical experience. I don't think you can put, Rachel's talked before about how, you could spend 24 hours a day doing caregiving for your, ill family member, but you can't count 24 hours a day for 7 months or whatever as the number of contact hours you have for that activity. So you have to be sort of conservative on that and really think about how many hours did I spend actually doing clinical care as opposed to making them dinner or doing this or that or the other thing. So you have to, I would say, err on the side of conservatism with that with the hour count on that clinical activity. Now, if that's the only clinical experience you have, I think that's problematic.
Yeah.
Because you're not, when you're dealing with an ill family member, they're going to treat you differently than somebody that you don't know would treat you.
Yep.
In a clinical setting. And in a clinical setting, you're going to be in, in this particular case with an ill family member, you're at home, or, potentially you're in, perhaps another location, but most likely either your home or their home. And it's it's a comfortable environment. You kind of have a lot of leeway in terms of what you're doing and when you're doing it and stuff. Clinical environment, such as a hospital or a clinic or a hospice situation or even a nursing home, very different. And so I would say you cannot depend on caring for an ill family member as your only experience. That will not work.
Yeah. The line that I always like to give is taking care of your grandma Gertrude is going to be different than taking care of someone else's grandma Gertrude.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
All right.
All right, let's see.
And again, if you're listening on Clubhouse, raise your hand. We'll bring you up to the stage, and you can get an answer from myself or Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, or Rachel Grubbs, MCAT expert du jour, or whatever that word is. So too big of a fancy word, too much of a fancy word. Victor here asks, I got my undergraduate degree abroad. I'm a U.S. citizen, and I have a master's degree in public policy from Cal State Long Beach. I haven't taken any science classes at all. Please, what are your thoughts? So this is one that I always cringe, unfortunately, for students who have been privileged enough to go overseas to get a degree, to go explore other cultures and other languages potentially. And then they want to go to medical school here in the States. And I'm just like, oh, that stings. Because it's hard, right? Talk about that process.
Yeah, it really is. And some of this is going to depend a little bit on the medical school, the individual medical schools. But, in this case, obviously this person's going to have to pick up all their science courses.
Yep.
All the prerequisites in addition to others. Now, I know that within the state of Texas, they're going to want to see 90 credit hours of undergraduate coursework in the U.S. and most of that's going to be sciences. So you're not going to be able to get away with just going and taking just the bare minimum science coursework to apply. Now, there will be other schools outside around the country that will be more amenable to that. But I think you need to be prepared for the idea that you've got more schooling than just a year and a half or so of science coursework, and that you would have to, pick up more. He doesn't really say what his, how he did in those. I'm assuming he did well in those in the undergrad abroad, as well as in the master's degree at Cal State Long Beach, but it doesn't really indicate that. But I think, basically my thoughts are you're going to have to go back to school. You're going to have to do undergraduate coursework in the sciences, and you need to pull good grades, and you need to show that you can do it. And you may have to do more than just the prerequisites themselves. You may have to fulfill up to 90 hours, depending on what the requirements of the individual medical schools you're looking at are.
Yeah. Yes. 90 hours. It's a big kind of cutoff, a big number to remember if you're an international student, if you have a different kind of upbringing in educational system wise, that 90 credit hours of U.S. credits is a big number that most schools go by.
Yep.
Awesome. Next up, Lauren.
All right.
I'm having trouble finding work that pays well during my gap year. I'm frustrated and wondering if you have any advice. I have a double BS in biology and biomedical sciences with 5+ years of clinical experience. Unfortunately, most companies take advantage of the fact that they know that students need clinical experience. So companies like scribe companies typically don't pay very well. EMT doesn't pay very well. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's the caveat here that I am uncomfortable with. That pays well.
Yeah.
I mean, you can find work.
Yep.
But it's, it depends on what you mean by pays well. I mean, what pays well in California or New York City is going to be a whole lot different than what pays well in, rural Mississippi. So that's the key sort of three words in that question that make me, very uncomfortable. And I can understand your frustration, and I can understand, the difficulties you're having. But I think that this is, it's a real challenge, and unfortunately, with a BS in biology and in biomedical science, 5 years of clinical experience, that's still not going to do a lot for you because you're not certified in anything. You don't have any skills necessarily. I would say the thing that you might look at, depending on where you're located, is if you're anywhere near an academic medical center where you can get a research job. But even a research technician, those aren't going to pay that well. So,
well, let me add a second thought into this. Is a lot of students think that they have to have a job that's medically related, and they're not thinking right. They're thinking black and white, and there's a huge gray area where they have a job that isn't medically related that pays well, and then every week and weekend or weeknight and weekends, right? That's when they're getting their clinical experience and getting some research in, potentially shadowing, whatever. They're filling in the rest of their time with the experiences that they need to continue to get into medical school. So there's lots of options.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with that completely. Yeah, you can go get a well-paying job that's outside of the context of clinical medicine, and then fill in, like you said, the gaps with volunteer work or other things.
Yeah. I'm excited for this next question. Again, if you're listening on Clubhouse, raise your hand, come up to the stage. We'll bring you on to ask a question with Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, Rachel Grubbs.
You talking about the one from our friend Sydney?
Yeah. I love
this
that
is
question.
a good one.
Yeah. So, am I crazy for wanting to apply this cycle with a 511 MCAT, a 3.67 GPA, and 400 clinical hours? Now, I'm going to leave out the next sentence. It seems like so many people have 1,000 plus clinical hours and a 515 MCAT these days.
Well, so
we'll add in the next sentence in a second. I just want to leave the sentence out for now.
My first question is, how do you know, Sydney, that so many people have 1,000 plus clinical hours and 515?
Because an anonymous account on Student Doctor Network said, I have a 520 and 3,000 clinical hours, 20 publications.
I can tell you, especially in the COVID period, there are very few people that have thousands of clinical hours. Now, the MCAT, I don't think that so many people have, great MCAT scores like in the 520 area and stuff like that. It's a bell curve if you think about it that way, that there's a lot more people with 511s than there are 515s.
Yeah.
There are a lot more people with 511s than 520s.
I'm looking at the distribution range, right? Less than 10% of people probably have a 515 plus.
Yeah.
Checking that.
So, I think that number one, you're not crazy for wanting to apply. I think the 511, 367 GPA, 400 clinical hours, within the numbers and stuff, I think that looks pretty secure to go ahead and apply to schools that you're interested in. Now, if you're only applying to the top 20 schools in the country, the Ivy League schools, or just the really most competitive schools, then but depending on where you're looking to apply and stuff like that, I definitely think you're in good shape to apply.
Yeah.
And then the second iteration I would say of this is, don't listen to Reddit and Student Doctor Network and things like that when people say, oh, there's all these people and they're all getting in and I whatever. That's just not the way things work. And I don't think that what you say there, it seems like so many people have blah, blah, blah. I don't think that that's accurate.
Yeah. So on its face, right, just that 511, 367, 400 clinical hours, right? Again, you have to tell the story and make sure it's all put together nicely. That sounds like a solid application. And then you add in the thing that I left out, that she's a URM student. And it's just like medical schools would die for a URM student with amazing stats. They die
Oh,
for
yeah.
for URM students in general who are
Oh, yeah.
strong applicants. So and that's why I left that out to begin with, because the URM part doesn't matter. That's a strong applicant, period.
Yeah, I agree completely. So Sydney, if you're listening, I'd say go for it.
Go for it. Shoot your shot.
Yeah, do it.
And keep us posted. We want to hear about your fun success stories.
Absolutely.
Come on, mission accepted. All right.
Okay, let's see. Oh, we just got a weird scroll. Let me find my place.
For those of you on Clubhouse, we're recording Ask the Dean with Dr. Scott Wright, former director of admissions at UT Southwestern, Rachel Grubbs, my co-founder at MAPT. Raise your hand. We'll bring you up to the stage. You can ask a question. We're answering questions from YouTube and Facebook right now. What should a pre-med student know about the medical school they are applying to make a good impression in their interview?
Yeah, this is a good question.
Yeah.
I think you want to research the school as much as possible. Obviously on their website, you want to know about their mission and their values. What are the things that they value as an institution? What is their mission as an institution? That could vary. A lot of schools have very similar pieces of their mission statement or their values, but it can vary pretty widely depending on if they're a school that is state supported, for example. And it's, we talked last week about, I think it was UC Riverside that we were talking about last week, where was it Riverside?
Riverside's always the one I bring up because it's a very mission driven for the Inland Empire in California.
Right. And so, that's going to dictate a lot about what they're looking for in the application. I would say what are the big, topics of research that they do. If there are certain departments that are big, at the institution, some schools are really big into global medicine or public health, or, there's areas that they really focus in on or have a reputation for. So those types of things I think are good to know about. You're never going to know everything about the school. And I think if you show it that you've made an effort to find out some of this stuff that are mission critical issues, then that'll be impressive to an interviewer.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, you don't have to be an expert in the school. I know the school was founded in 1849 and blah, blah, blah.
Yes. I remember when they broke ground here on this site.
I always like to break out one of my favorite fun facts about Ohio State, which is that it was originally just an agricultural campus.
Mm-hmm.
And they built it a whole 2 miles from downtown because they figured that was far enough away that it would always stay farmland.
Oh, wow.
And of course, now it's just like in the middle of
everything.
A 1 million person metropolitan area.
Oops.
That's funny.
Here we go.
How would you address academic dishonesty from freshman year in the application? This incident resulted in a no pass in a 1-credit seminar class, no effect on GPA, from not citing a definition resulting in plagiarism. What is the best way you can show growth? Whew. Luckily, it's freshman year.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Freshman year. If this, popped up in your junior, senior year, that could be a little bit different. But I just say you talk about it. So it's just like everything else I talk about. There's the what and the so what. So the what is what happened. This is what happened. This is what I did. Blah blah blah. The details of the situation. The so what is what did you learn from this experience? Did you learn to cite things better, to be more careful in your citations, to be more careful in quoting, in documentation? Did you learn about the importance of academic honesty in general? What are the things that you learned out of this experience? And it doesn't have to be lengthy. Most of these application services, the room they give you to explain an academic dishonesty type thing, you don't have a whole lot of space, and so you kind of include it in a nutshell. But always keeping in mind what happened, what's the scenario, what's the situation, what all happened, And then, so what? What was the meaning of this to you? What was the relevance of it to your life? What did you learn from it? And then that's it. That's what you say.
Yep. I like it. Own it. Own it. I think
Yeah, you
this
gotta own it.
potentially, at least the way that the student presented it looks like it potentially could be an easy one to deflect of like, oh, it's just, I forgot to cite this one thing. And so just own it and talk about what you learned from it.
Yeah.
I have 1 year left before I take the MCAT. I have O-chem and some other courses left with a current GPA of 3.6, and the fact that I do not do well in chemistry. How should I prepare for my final year of studies, and how will this affect my chances of medical school?
I have O-chem and some other courses left. So if you didn't, so the first thing I would say about chemistry is if you're saying I do not do well in chemistry. So what that basically means is you didn't do well in general chemistry. Now, what I would say is you might, it's a possibility, find out that you connect with O-chem much differently than you do with general chemistry. Students react very differently to the two. And some students who really connect with general chemistry don't with O-chem. If they didn't connect with gen, they do with O-chem. It's a mixed bag there. They're very different conceptually.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you should go into it psyching yourself out that, oh, I'm not going to do well in O-chem because I never do well in chemistry. That's my first thing to say.
Yep.
And so work hard, and you've got a good GPA going with a 3.6. That's a good, strong GPA. Don't go into it defeated from the very get-go in terms of going into O-chem. Prepare well, study hard, get into study groups, visit the professor in his or her classroom. Just do the things that you've got to do to do well in it, but don't go into it thinking, this is a huge barrier to get over. You may get in there and love O-chem. It's really hard to know. So now, having said that, how will this affect my chances of medical school? I think if you don't knock the ball out of the park in O-chem, in other words, if you don't make an A, if you make a B, then I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing overall, and may not affect in any notable way your chances of med school. Now, if you do very poorly, I know that med schools do look at O-chem grades. I used to have admissions committee members at UT Southwestern, that was one of the key things they looked at. How did they do in O-chem, and specifically, how did they do in the lab of O-chem? They would look very specifically at that lab grade for O-chem. Mm-hmm. And so, but that was just a few, members that had, some background to that. So I would say go into O-chem this next year or whenever you're going to take it with a positive attitude. You're going to rock it. You're going to do well at it, and just go into it that way. And then I think that'd be the best attitude to have.
Yeah.
I want to chime in one piece on the MCAT piece of this. So this isn't a very precise commentary or timeline, but you say, question asker, I have O-chem and some other courses left. I'm going to presume that means you also have biochem left, which plays a really, really big role on the MCAT. I know some schools are still requiring that you complete O-chem 2 before you take biochem, but fewer and fewer are requiring that. And although you probably are going to need O-chem 2 for med school, because most med schools are still requiring a year of organic, you may want to think about doing O-chem 1 and then biochem, or doing them concurrently if your schedule can handle it. It sounds like for you that'll be a semester you have to hype yourself up for, but you want that biochem under your belt when you take the MCAT because it's huge.
Definitely.
Yes.
All right. We've probably got time for a couple more. Let's see.
What are some guidelines we should follow for answering, quote, why medicine, if we were first exposed to medicine much later in life? got a book on it, all about writing a
Yeah.
personal statement. That basically is the template in my mind on how I like to teach students how to think about that why medicine question, because that's what the personal statement is, right? It's why do you want to be a doctor, with a little bit of spice added on sometimes. So
no, definitely. And, and I think there are many, many, many applicants who were not exposed to this idea of going to medical school early in life. Some students have this thing. Oh, when I was 5 years old, I was dissecting a frog on the sidewalk, and I decided I wanted to be a doctor, and it just goes from there. Other people don't come into it until much later in life, when something happens, or they experience something, or they're doing some soul searching or whatever. And so I think it's absolutely, there's no right answer here. There's no right or wrong answer here in terms of why medicine. Well, I guess there's some wrong answers, but there's not just definite right answers. There's a lot of right answers, in fact. And so I would say you just tell your story, and you do that in a way that's going to make sense to a reader who's never met you before. And if that was later in life, then you tell it, and you tell it like it happened, and how it played out for you.
That is it. Yeah, I think there's some I can't think of the right word. Just some fear. Fear's not the right word, but some insecurities is a better word around being a late bloomer in terms of medicine. That's not right, or medical schools won't like that because of all of these other students who knew from a young age. Yeah. And that's just not true, right? You run your own race, tell your own story.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. We got a couple people hanging out in the clubhouse. If you want to come on the stage, raise your hand, ask a question. We're going to be wrapping up here in a couple minutes.
All right. So if you're waiting for someone to raise your hand there, I'll give you this one from YouTube.
About how many different people should we get to review medical school essays, especially the personal statement? Awesome question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you have to be kind of careful with that, about who you're getting to review your essays. If you're looking for mom and dad to do it, or your best friend or whatever, sometimes that's not the greatest thing, because they love you and they think everything you do is fantastic, and you're just wonderful person, and who wouldn't want you in their medical school? So it has to be somebody who's critical, who will be willing to be critical for you. And I would also suggest that it needs to be somebody who maybe has some background in this field. That's why there are pre-med advisors at your institutions. Hopefully, you have access. I guess it's NIA to a pre-med advisor that has experience with that and can be beneficial. Obviously, Mapped, we have services available for editing and giving suggestions and stuff like that for essays and secondary essays and character, activity descriptions and stuff like that. So you can seek out and pay people to do it. But if you're going to find people in your life already that are doing it, you need to find people who are willing to really say the hard stuff, but who also somewhat know what they're doing, and maybe they have experience in writing and can give you information, really good help in the structure of the essay and in the word, the sentence structures and stuff like that, grammar. But also having somebody who knows some stuff about getting into medical school and stuff like that in terms of content, that you really want to have some people look at it.
Yeah. I think one of the things to think about there is something, Rachel, that you say all the time that actually made it into my new book is find someone who respects you more than loves you. Someone who is going to give you what they think is the honest truth, right? It's one person's opinion. It may be right or wrong, but what they think is the truth, and not someone who will protect your feelings.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Absolutely.
Any pings on Clubhouse, Ryan?
Nobody on Clubhouse wants to come to the stage and ask a question of you guys. I think they're scared of you. That's okay. Raise your hand. Come on. We only got a couple more minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, we've got a couple more here. I just wanted to make sure that the Clubhouse folks were getting representation.
We got
too.
one here. We got one. Let's bring.
All right, let's do it.
Let's bring August on. Hello, August. Let me.
Good evening, everybody. You guys can hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Hi, Ryan. Hey, thank you guys so much for this. I just have a really quick question. So, I am extremely non-traditional, and I'm going to be applying. I guess you could say this summer, and I'm going to be taking the MCAT in June. But my question is, I work full time, and I'm kind of at this point where I'm realizing that, like, I started studying for the MCAT last year, but I'm realizing as time, continues to, keep going, I'm realizing that I'm most likely I'm going to have to probably take a month off. So I can really, really, really focus, because right now work is kind of getting, it's kind of distracting me, and I don't feel as comfortable as I should when it comes to getting ready. And it's already February, and, June's going to be here before we know it. And so I'm just wondering, have you heard from non-traditional students, specifically those who work full time? Have you heard from them about them having to take off? Because I just feel like it's causing me a little bit of anxiety, just because, I am used to working and all that, but I know I'm gonna have to do it at some point. And so can you speak a little bit to that? And is that normal of how I'm feeling? Because I just don't think that I can do both at the same time, in terms of working and going to school and volunteering and all that. So
now, Miss August, I keep forgetting that we're just talking to each other like on the phone through the Clubhouse app. So I've been smiling and nodding at you this whole time.
sorry.
I'm going, yep,
okay.
you sound like you're on the right track. So now I'll say some words. Yeah, this is normal. It's such a bummer. It seems kind of unjust to me, right? Because we have bills to pay. We have, mortgages and rent, and maybe we have parents or,
Adulting
grandbabies
sucks.
or babies who need us to pay those bills. And yet the MCAT really rewards you if you can make the MCAT a full-time job. It is absolutely possible to prep for the MCAT as a part-time job and then still do well on it. But yeah, a lot of the non-traditionals that I've known over the years through MCAT prep have at least taken some chunk of time off work if they could make it work financially and from a scheduling standpoint. And then the good news here is it's February and you're telling me, I see June coming fast. Like, I've had people have these panic thoughts in April or May for the June test. So, like, I'm glad you're thinking ahead. And I think the next stage of that, and like, not to pry into your life, but just for you to personally consider, is what else is going to need to happen? Is there, childcare or remote learning that's happening at home, or, are you going to need to find a place to take practice tests because you're never going to be able to sit down for 8 hours in your house without being interrupted? Like, start thinking through that stuff so that if you do choose to take time off, that you're really making it absolutely worth that sacrifice.
Yeah, I can tell you that one of the things that I've realized, and I guess I'm glad that I started to do this earlier, but I'm all done now with my shadowing hours, because I actually work at a health center, and I'm almost done with my volunteer hours. I've been I have about 70 hours with the National Suicide Hotline, and even that, like, I did that yesterday. And I realized, like, okay, this is going to be too much, and so I've got to kind of scale back. But the good news is that I'm pretty much done with that. So now I can solely just focus on, studying. And, I guess you can never be fully prepared, but I'm just trying to do what I need to do, because it's happening fast. So anyway, Thank you so much for answering that.
Yeah, you're really welcome. Best of luck.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks, August.
Way to go, August. Yeah.
All right. Should we call it there?
I think so.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone on Clubhouse for joining us. And August, thanks for coming up on stage to ask your question. Again, we are the Mapped team. Mapped is a new technology platform that's only been out since August of 2020 for pre-med students to track and get feedback on your pre-med journey. As soon as you know your pre-med, you should sign up for Mapped over at mapped.com, mappd.com. prerequisites.com. You can enter your courses, enter your activities, enter your MCAT scores, and based on what you enter into MAP, the more you enter in, the more feedback that we can give you. We're building a lot of that stuff out right now, so lots of exciting things for the future. And if you're at an undergraduate institution and you have an amazing pre-health advisor that you have access to, you can invite them to view your mapped data as well. So lots of fun toys out there for the world. And I think the first Monday of every month, we're going to go live on all of the channels. This is usually reserved for our mapped members only in our private mapped Facebook group. That's all I got.
Yeah, sounds good.
Everyone have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Adios.